I want to take you on a journey, not into fantasy, not into dreams of dragons or lands that never were, but into a moment of history, one wrapped in shadows, where myth and memory blur together. Close your eyes. The world around you slowly fades away. What you hear now is not the quiet of your own room, but the distant hum of a city that once ruled the ancient world. You are in Alexandria, over 2,000 years ago, a place where marble streets met the desert winds, and where the gods of Egypt still walked in the minds of men. Night has fallen. The air is heavy with the smoke of torches and the scent of burning incense. The faint roar of the Mediterranean mixes with the slower, deeper breath of the Nile. To your left, merchants close their wooden shutters, their voices fading into whispers. To your right, beyond the walls, the lighthouse of Alexandria rises. As you walk the streets, you notice shadows moving quietly. A stray cat slips past your feet, its eyes glinting like embers. A pair of guards pass by, their spears reflecting the firelight. Somewhere nearby, an owl cries out, a sharp sound that echoes off the stone before the silence swallows it again. Alexandria never truly sleeps. In hidden chambers, priests of Isis prepare offerings, their chants muffled by walls thick with centuries of devotion. In quiet rooms, scribes bend over papyrus, recording words that most will never read. The temples remain open, their carved pillars glowing faintly in the firelight, as if the gods themselves were unwilling to rest. And as you walk deeper into the city, your breath seems to match its rhythm, steady, ancient, unchanging. Then you hear something else. Not the sea, not the wind, not the footsteps of soldiers. It is a whisper, faint, almost hidden in the stone walls and the dark corners of the city. A reminder that in this place, every shadow carries a story, and every story holds a secret. And deep inside, you sense the truth. This night is unlike any other. This is the night when the gods will visit Cleopatra. When people today think of Cleopatra, they often picture beauty, seduction, and power. But the truth is far deeper. She was not just the last pharaoh of Egypt. She was a woman who had mastered languages, politics, and the art of survival. By the time she took the throne, Egypt was no longer the empire it once was. Rome was rising. Egypt was fragile. And yet, Cleopatra managed to rule as though she were born to defy the tide of history. She spoke at least 9 languages. She studied philosophy, astronomy, and medicine. She was more than a queen sitting on a throne. She was a strategist, a negotiator, a leader who could outthink her rivals. Even her enemies, men like Plutarch centuries later, admitted her true strength was not only in beauty, but in presence, in intellect, in the way she could command attention the moment she entered a room. But Cleopatra was also something more, a living symbol of the divine. To her people, she was the embodiment of Isis, the goddess of magic, fertility, and protection. It wasn't just politics, it was survival. By presenting herself as a goddess made flesh, she gave the Egyptian people hope that the gods had not abandoned them. And so, in ceremonies at temples across the Nile, when Cleopatra appeared, it was not only as a queen, it was as Isis herself. Clothed in shimmering linen, wearing the headdress of the goddess, her presence carried the weight of eternity. Imagine standing in the great temple halls. Columns rise like stone forests. Torches flicker against walls carved with the names of gods. Priests chant, the air thick with incense. And there, at the center, stands Cleopatra. Not just a ruler of flesh and blood, but a bridge between worlds. For the people of Egypt, she was not only a queen. She was a living reminder that the gods still walked among them. But for those who stood closest, her guards, her servants, her scribes, the line between woman and goddess became harder to see. And on nights like that, but by those who stood in the shadows, silent observers, forgotten by history, I was one of them. Not a general, not a priest. I was only a man of the palace, a scribe tasked with recording what was meant to be remembered and ignoring what was not. By day, I was invisible. I copied decrees, balanced accounts, and watched great men argue over taxes and grain. No one looked at me twice. No one cared who I was. But that night, on the night when the gods came closer than ever before, I was there, hidden, silent, and what I saw has haunted me for the rest of my life. I remember the stillness of the corridors. The torches hissed as if they were afraid to burn too loudly. The marble floor felt colder than usual beneath my sandals. Every step echoed in the empty palace halls, as if the walls themselves were listening. I should not have been there. Men like me were not meant to walk those halls after dark. But something drew me forward. Curiosity, perhaps, or fate. From the shadows, I saw her, Cleopatra, the queen, seated alone in the great chamber. The usual attendants, the guards, the chatter of court life, all gone. She was alone. And yet, I swear to you, she was not. Her eyes were fixed on the darkened air before her, her lips moving in silence, as though speaking to someone unseen. I could feel it too, a weight in the room, the kind of presence that presses on your chest and slows your breath. It was as if the chamber had been filled with something more than air. I knew then what I was witnessing was not meant for mortal eyes. This was not the queen before her people. This was not Cleopatra, the politician, the ruler, the strategist. This was Cleopatra, the goddess, or at least that is what I thought. For in the silence, I began to wonder if I was truly alone in that chamber, or if something else had already arrived, watching us both from the dark. Alexandria, a city unlike any other in the ancient world, a meeting point between desert and sea, east and west, gods and men. The air was heavy with scent, spices from India, frankincense from Arabia, the salt of the sea carried in from the harbor. Every breath was a reminder that Alexandria was not just Egypt's city. It was the crossroads of the known world, and all the omens pointed to one place, the chambers of Cleopatra, the queen who was Isis, the woman who dared to speak with gods. At the heart of Alexandria, beyond the noise of the markets and the glow of the harbor, stood a temple dedicated to the goddess who was both mother and protector. Isis. That night, as the omens gathered, Cleopatra walked its stone corridors. The temple loomed against the night sky, its walls carved with stories older than memory. Scenes of gods walking among men, of life springing from the Nile, of judgment, rebirth, and eternity. The figures flickered in the torchlight, their shadows dancing across the stone as if the carvings themselves were alive. The queen walked slowly, her footsteps echoing. No musicians followed her, no procession of guards, only silence. And in that silence, you could feel the weight of centuries pressing down, as though every prayer ever spoken in that temple still lingered in the air. Before her lay offerings, bowls of fruit, jars of honey, flowers wilting under the torchlight. But Cleopatra did not kneel in the way common people did. She stood tall, her head lifted, as though speaking to an equal. Her lips moved in whispers, not loud enough for any man to hear. But in the stillness of the chamber, you could almost believe the goddess listened. And then came the sound, a low hum, not from the earth, not from the torches, but from somewhere unseen. It pulsed softly, like the beating of a heart. I watched from the shadows, barely daring to breathe. It was as if the walls themselves were listening. The queen's eyes closed, her hands lifted, palms open to the sky. And for a moment, I could not tell if Cleopatra was praying to Isis, or if Isis was praying through Cleopatra. And in that glow, I felt the presence of Ra, the sun god, his voice unspoken yet burning in the air, a warmth that whispered of power, of cycles that never end, of light that sees all. But the light was not alone. In the shadow beside it, darker than the night, a figure seemed to form, tall, silent, watching. I did not see his face, only the shape of a jackal's head outlined in the torchlight. And though he said nothing, I felt the weight of judgment, the gaze of Anubis, guardian of the dead, measuring every soul, even mine, though I dared not move. Then came a third presence, softer, quieter, but no less powerful. The air cooled, the scent of incense grew sweeter, and a calmness fell over the queen. It was as though invisible hands touched her shoulders, steadying her. This was Isis herself, not a stone, but a spirit, a mother, a protector, a goddess whose voice was not heard in sound, but in the steady rhythm of the heart. Cleopatra did not flinch. She raised her arms, her palms open, and in that moment, she did not look like a woman at all. She looked like a being caught between two worlds, half mortal, half divine. Her whispers grew louder, though I could not understand the words. They were not Greek, not Egyptian, not any tongue I knew. They were older, older than empires, older than men. Words meant for gods. The torches hissed. The glow and the shadows swirled together like light and smoke twisting into one. And for a moment, I believe the gods had truly descended, not as visions, but as real as the stone under my feet. I should have looked away. I should have fled. But I couldn't, because deep inside a terrible thought took root. Perhaps the gods had not come to comfort Cleopatra. Perhaps they had come to judge her. Cleopatra's eyes opened. They did not look at the statue, nor at the shadows where the gods seemed to dwell. They looked forward, into the dark space between worlds. And for a moment, I thought she was not praying at all. I thought she was negotiating. Her hands lowered slowly, as if to weigh something unseen. The flame nearest to her steadied, its smoke rising in a perfect, unbroken line. The air, heavy a moment before, suddenly grew still, balanced, like a scale after judgment. Cleopatra bowed her head, not deeply, not in submission, but in acknowledgement, as one ruler might incline to another. The chamber felt lighter, but not safe. The presences remained. Ra's warmth lingered in the air. Anubis's gaze pressed against the edges of the room, and Isis, calm, enduring, seemed to rest her unseen hand upon the queen. I wanted to believe it was a dream, that exhaustion had turned shadows into figures, that incense had tricked my mind. But then Cleopatra spoke again, this time in Greek. Her words were faint, but I heard them. The world belongs to men, but Egypt belongs to the gods. She turned, her eyes sweeping the chamber, and though I was hidden in shadow, I swear for a heartbeat she saw me. Her gaze met mine, steady, unafraid, as if to remind me that what I had witnessed was not meant to be forgotten, but carried. That was the moment I understood. Cleopatra had not only prayed, she had bound herself to the gods, and perhaps to a fate neither Rome nor Egypt could ever undo. When the whispers faded and the air of the temple grew still again, I felt something stir in my thoughts. Not just fear, not just awe, but the heavy weight of history itself. For Cleopatra was not only a queen of the present, she was the last thread of a dynasty that had ruled Egypt for nearly 300 years. The Ptolemies, children of Alexander's empire. And in her, all their power and all their fragility was gathered. Egypt was old, older than Rome, older than Greece. Its gods had watched empires rise and fall for millennia. But now Rome's shadow stretched across the world. Legions marched farther each year, and the Senate's will had begun to feel like destiny. Cleopatra understood this better than anyone. That is why she bound herself so closely to the gods. It was not only faith, it was survival. If Rome's strength was in armies, then Egypt's strength was in eternity, in symbols, in rituals, in the belief that their queen was more than mortal. But as I stood in that temple, watching her bow her head in silent pact, I could not help but wonder, had she been granted protection, or had she been warned of her end? For even then, the stories of Rome reached our ears. Julius Caesar, the conqueror, whose ambition rivaled the mountains themselves. Mark Antony, fierce and proud, a man whose heart burned brighter than his judgment. Men of power who would step into Cleopatra's life and bind her fate not only to Egypt, but to the destiny of the world itself. It was as though the gods were not only listening to her, they were preparing her to stand between empires, between past and future, between the mortal and the divine. The pillars of the temple seemed to echo with it. Every carving, every prayer left on the stone whispered of cycles repeating, the rise of kings, the fall of empires, the endless hunger of time. I wondered if Cleopatra, in her silence, saw those same visions, not only of Egypt's glory, but of its decline, of a future where her name would be remembered long after the empire itself had turned to dust. For that is the paradox of history. The greater the shadow of a person, the shorter the candle that burns it. And Cleopatra's shadow stretched across the world. I walked through those halls as quietly as I could, my footsteps echoing too loudly in my own ears. Each sound seemed to betray me. A creak in the floor, a shuffle of fabric. They rang out as though the walls themselves were listening. It was strange to stand in the home of Egypt's queen and feel as though I were intruding. But such is the nature of silence. It does not welcome you. It judges you. From the windows, I could see the city stretching out toward the sea. Faint glimmers of fire marked the harbor. Beyond that, only darkness. The endless horizon where Egypt met the world. Somewhere out there Rome's ship sailed. Somewhere out there the future waited. But here, in these halls, time felt frozen. The world outside could rage. Empires could rise and fall. But within these walls, there was only breath, only shadow, only the weight of unspoken things. The courtiers slept, the servants dreamed, the soldiers dozed with hands on their spears. None of them knew what was unfolding just beyond their reach. None of them heard the whispers that stirred in the temple. None of them felt the presence that pressed upon the night. It was a strange comfort to walk among so many who slept, while knowing the queen herself was awake, keeping a vigil with gods instead of men. The night air was cool, carrying the faint smell of water and reeds. Somewhere, I could hear the low creak of wooden boats swaying against the docks. The river's rhythm matched my own breathing, slow, steady, unchanging. With every breath, I felt more certain. The Nile was not just a river, it was memory. It was time itself. Priests used to say the Nile was the vein of Osiris, the god who died and was reborn. Its flood was his heartbeat, its waters, his gift of life. And standing there, I could almost believe it was true. The river seemed alive, a god that had watched centuries unfold, a witness to all things, keeping secrets no man could ever write down. I thought of Cleopatra, of her whispers in the temple, her pact with the gods, her fate bound to empires far beyond these shores. And then I thought of the river, calm, eternal, unmoved by the rise and fall of kingdoms. I closed my eyes and listened. The sound of the river was soft, but it carried everything within it. The voices of fishermen, the splash of oars, the songs of priests echoing across the water, and something deeper, a hum that belonged not to men, but to eternity itself. And in that hum, I felt peace. A peace older than the city, older than the queen, older than history. The Nile did not belong to us. We belong to it. Cleopatra returned to her chambers, her steps slow, deliberate, as though she carried not just the weight of her crown, but the burden of the gods themselves. I remained in the shadows, my heart still heavy, my thoughts racing with questions that would never have answers. Had I truly seen the gods step into this world? Or had I only witnessed a queen so powerful, so certain of her destiny, that she could make even the divine bend toward her? I will never know. And I, a simple scribe, was the only witness. For years I kept that memory buried. No papyrus recorded it. No inscription carved it. It lived only in me. A secret pressed into my mind like a sealing wax. But as I grew older, I came to understand why it lingered. The gods do not always speak to the mighty. Sometimes they choose the forgotten, the silent, the ones who watch from the edges. And so I tell it now, not as a story of triumph, nor as a tale of fear, but as a reminder that even the greatest of queens was not alone in the night. Cleopatra's empire would fall, Rome would rise, the palaces would crumble, the library would burn. But the secret of that night, the night when the gods visited Egypt's last queen, still drifts unseen, like the whisper of the Nile under the star. Perhaps it was real, perhaps it was only a dream, but dreams too are powerful, and sometimes they are the only truths we have left. So close your eyes now. Let the silence of the palace surround you. Let the river carry you. Let the gods watch from their shadows. And sleep, knowing that some secrets are not meant to be solved, only remembered.